Starward horizons. In the centuries since we first broke Earth's gravity, we learned a simple truth. The universe does not give up its secrets willingly. We built faster engines, smarter machines, stronger hulls. We pushed outward into the darkness until the night sky became a map of human lights. But the deeper we go, the more we find signs we cannot explain. Structures too old to measure, signals with no source, worlds that look arranged. Somewhere beyond the charted lanes, a pattern is emerging, one that suggests we are not the first to reach for the stars, and whatever came before us may not be gone. This is the starship Argo. This is Captain Raphael A. Sterling. The quest for the infinite begins here. Episode 6. The Hollow Shell. The megastructure did not look like a ship. It looked like the idea of a world that had been abandoned halfway through becoming one. From a distance, it was a curve against the stars. An arc of dark material so broad that the Argo's perspective struggled to hold it as a single object. A shallow crescent, station-sized, with gaps along its rim where emptiness showed through like missing teeth. The faint starlight that did touch it died quickly, swallowed by a surface that refused to shine back. Commander Calder kept cycling magnification, as if a closer view would make it less impossible. "It's hollow," he said, voice tight. "Not a habitat shell, not a Dyson fragment, too thin, too deliberate, like a casing." Dr. Soren Kale leaned forward at science, eyes narrowed. A casing for what? Cade's hands were still untactical, but her posture was all forward tension. A casing for a trap. Captain Sterling watched the structure rotate slowly, so slowly it was almost a trick of perception. The Argo's sensors returned clean edges and clean voids. Nothing like natural rock and nothing like human metal either. "Any emissions?" Sterling asked. "Alu Ekea. Nothing active. Minimal thermal. If it's doing anything, it's doing it quietly." Tanaka's voice came from engineering, threaded with restrained excitement. "Captain, the hush field is being shaped. Not by us, by the structure. Like it's a lens." Sterling's jaw tightened. "Explain." "It's not suppressing noise uniformly," Tanaka said. "It's focusing it, redirecting it. If the null chapel was a blanket, this is a mirror. Only it reflects absence." Petrov's voice cut in from medbay, calm but pointed. "A mirror reflects what you bring into it," Cade muttered. "And what follows you." Calder's console chimed softly, and his expression changed. Sterling saw it instantly. "What did you find?" Calder hesitated, then brought the signal overlay up on the main display. "Captain, we're receiving a faint carrier in a band that shouldn't survive out here. It's not conventional radio. It's harmonics riding the hush." Calder's eyes widened. "Something is using the hush band as a communications medium." Calder nodded, swallowing. "And the pattern, Captain, it has human cadence." Cade's head snapped toward him. "Say that again." "It's degraded," Calder said. "Stretched. Folded. But it repeats on an interval that looks like human timing. Like a beacon, like..." Petrov's voice went quiet. "Like a distress call." Silence held on the bridge for a beat. Sterling stared at the arc of the shell, the gaps in its rim, the way it swallowed starlight, and imagined someone else. Human, or human adjacent, finding this place first and deciding to knock. "Can we isolate it?" Sterling asked. Calder's fingers moved fast. "I can try, but, Captain, if this is coming through the hush band, it might be gated. It might only be audible because we're using the handshake protocol." Tanaka's voice came again, urgent. He's right. The handshake gave us a way to be heard in that space. It also means we can be addressed. Mari bludi to mat space? It also means we can be addressed. Cade's tone was flat. So the registry didn't just mark us. It gave us an inbox. Kale murmured. Or a leash. Sterling's eyes stayed on the structure. Bring us to standoff range, he ordered. No closer. Drones first. Passive. Cade's hands moved without hesitation. Launching. The drone slipped forward like cautious fish toward a dead reef. As they approached, the ghost signal strengthened, not louder, but cleaner. The shell wasn't transmitting powerfully. It was simply making transmission possible, bending the hush like a throat shaping a whisper. On the drone feeds, the shell's surface resolved into fine geometry, shallow channels, arcs, and seams that were too regular for decoration and too subtle for structural reinforcement. They looked like the physical imprint of field behavior, like the groove pattern in a record meant to be played by something that wasn't sound. Those channels, Kale said softly. They're waveguides. Calder's eyes flicked between feed and signal readout. The shell is an antenna. Tanaka sounded almost breathless. It's a hush resonator, a giant passive coupler. It doesn't need to generate power. It just shapes what already exists. Petrov's voice came through again, clinical and wary. A system that can make you audible can also make you legible. Cade's jaw tightened. So, how do we rescue the voice without giving it our throats? And Sterling didn't look away from the feeds. Carefully. The drones found a gap along the rim, a notch wide enough to admit the Argo's shuttle, but only barely. Inside the gap was darkness, and beyond that darkness, a slow drift of faint particles like frost, suspended in space. Calder highlighted a faint line in the drift. There, he said. Something inside is reflecting our drone LiDAR. Metallic. The drone eased forward. The object rotated into view. Human, not in style. Nothing so clean. But in its refusal to be anything else, a small craft, battered and darkened, with hull plating that had once been bright and had long since been sandblasted by time. Its silhouette was wrong for the Argo's era. Older, chunkier, with external tanks and a nose that looked like it had been built for stubbornness rather than elegance. And along its flank, barely readable through the drone's glare, was a faded emblem, too worn to identify precisely, but unmistakably Earth-made. Calder's voice cracked. Captain! Cade's face went hard. How old? Kale's eyes were wide. This is not one of ours. Not from this mission. Sterling felt his pulse slow in a way that wasn't calm so much as shock. Any life signs? Calder shook his head. None. No heat. No power. Petrov's voice was very quiet now. Then the voice isn't coming from a living transmitter. Tanaka whispered. It's an echo. Cade looked at Sterling. Captain, we leave. We mark the coordinates. We come back later with... Sterling cut her off, not sharply, but firmly. We don't leave a human craft inside an alien structure that's shaping the hush band, he said. Not without knowing what it did to it. Cade's jaw clenched. And if what it did to it is why it's dead? Sterling met her gaze. Then we learn the cost before it costs us. Kale's voice was soft. Captain, the distress cadence. It might not be a call for help anymore. It might be a record, a residue. Petrov added, or a lure. Sterling turned back to the main display. The shell rotated in silence, indifferent to their arguments. Tanaka, he said. Handshake protocol status. Ready, Tanaka replied. But Captain, inside the shell, the hush lensing will be stronger. It may amplify exchange attempts. If anything tries to couple to mines. Canceller stays active, Sterling said. Full. Cade's gaze didn't soften. And crew? Sterling's tone left no room for debate. Drones first, then shuttle. Then a minimal team. Tethered. Timed. If anything feels wrong, we withdraw. Petrov's voice came, satisfied by the procedure even as her worry remained. 10 minutes, Cade snapped. 5. Sterling looked at her. 7, he said. Cade held his gaze, then gave a single tight nod. Calder swallowed. Captain, if that craft is from Earth, if it predates us by decades, then either it came through a different route or we're not the first to be curious, Sterling finished quietly. Cale murmured, curiosity has a long shadow. Sterling watched the drone feeds. The older craft drifted in place as if pinned by an invisible current. Around it, faint particles traced slow arcs, like the shell was breathing. Launch the shuttle, Sterling ordered. Inside the shuttle, the hush felt thicker, not heavier. Petrov would have objected to that language, but more present. Like the air inside their suits had become smoother. The stars outside the forward viewport looked slightly dimmer, as if the shuttle's gaze itself had been softened. Cade piloted. Tanaka monitored portable hush and canceller arrays, hands steady, despite the tension in her shoulders. Petrov watched crew biofeeds with the intensity of someone waiting for a subtle disaster. Sterling sat in silence, listening to the absence like it might speak first. The shuttle slipped through the rim gap and into the shell's interior. The darkness inside wasn't empty. It was structured. Their lights caught segments of interior ribs, thin arcs of matte black material that didn't connect like beams so much as guide curves. Between them drifted a gentle cloud of frost-like particles that shimmered when the shuttle's field touched them. It's like dust, Tanaka whispered. But it's not charged. It's suspended. Cale wasn't with them. He remained on the Argo, managing long-range analysis. But his voice came over calm, quiet and intense. Those particles are acting like a visualization medium. They're responding to the hush gradients. You're flying through a map. Cade's jaw tightened. A map to where? Petrov's eyes flicked across her tablet. To where it wants you. Sterling didn't answer. He watched the older craft drift nearer, the shuttle closing the distance like a slow approach to a grave. Up close. The craft looked worse. Hull scars, micrometeor impacts, seams warped by temperature extremes. A hatch on one side was partially open, frozen in a half-escape posture. Cade's voice was low. No one got out. Sterling stared at the half-open hatch and felt a quiet anger, not at any person, but at the concept of a universe that allowed this. Can we retrieve it? He asked. Tanaka hesitated. Maybe, but look. She pointed at the craft's rear. There were marks on it, not damage, not random. Thin lines etched into the hull, plating in deliberate patterns. Shallow grooves that mimicked the waveguide channels on the shell's outer surface. Cade's eyes narrowed. It's been modified. Petrov's voice tightened. Or branded. Sterling felt a coldness in his stomach. Borrower's mark, he said quietly, and the phrase from episode landed with new weight. The distress cadence strengthened suddenly, filling their comm channel, not as audio, but as a pattern their systems translated into something human, perceivable. A pulse, a pause, a repeating rhythm like someone tapping on a wall. Then, for the first time, it shifted. The pattern changed to something that felt like a response. Tanaka's eyes widened. It noticed us. The handshake protocol is being addressed. Petrov's voice went sharp. Captain, your cortical activity just dipped again. Small, but this is the same suppression profile as the Null Chapel. Sterling kept his voice steady. Canceller. Tanaka's fingers moved fast. Active. Compensating. Cade muttered. It's trying to hush us into compliance. Sterling looked at the older craft. Or it's trying to keep us from panicking, Petrov snapped. Those are not mutually exclusive. The shuttle's lights caught the inner curvature of the shell more clearly now. The ribs weren't structural. They were arranged like the inside of an instrument, like the resonator array from the dust world, scaled up until it was a place you could fly. Gale's voice came, hushed with awe. "Captain, this is a transducer, a passive one. It takes presence, motion, field disturbance, identity tokens, and converts it into hush band patterning. It's a relay." Cade's voice was flat. "A relay to where?" Calder answered from the bridge, tense. "Captain, the Argo is detecting faint outbound coupling toward the hub direction. The shell is aligned with the route." Sterling's throat tightened. "So this is how the network talks." Petrov's eyes narrowed. "Or how it reports." Silence fell. Sterling stared at the older craft again, at the grooves etched into its hull like a signature written by someone else. "Doctor," Sterling said quietly, "if this place is a relay, and that craft is marked, what happens if we touch it?" Petrov's answer came without hesitation. "We become part of the message." Cade's hand tightened on the controls. "Then we don't touch it." Tanaka's voice was strained, torn between ethics and engineering. "Captain, if we don't retrieve it, we may never know what happened. We may never know how to prevent it." Sterling watched the craft drift, half-open hatch like a mouth that couldn't finish a word. "Drones," he said. "No hands, no suits. Drones only." Cade's jaw tightened, but she accepted the compromise. She deployed a small manipulator drone from the shuttle bay. The drone drifted to the craft, slow and careful, and extended a sensor arm toward the etched grooves. The moment the sensor arm crossed a few centimeters of space near the hull, the hush inside the shell deepened abruptly. Petrov's voice sharpened. "Captain, neural suppression just increased across the team." Tanaka swore softly, hands moving. "Canceller boosting." The drone touched the hull. The etched grooves on the older craft pulsed, not with light, but with a subtle distortion, as if the surface was momentarily less real. And the distress cadence changed again. This time it wasn't tapping. It was structured. A handshake query, a challenge-response pattern that Tanaka's portable unit caught and translated into a simple conclusion. "It's not a distress call," she whispered. "It's authentication." Cade's eyes narrowed. "The craft is being used as a key." Cale's voice came, grim. "Or as a credential. A dead ship serving as proof that it was here." Sterling felt his stomach drop. "Then the voice is the system." Checking the ledger. Petrov's tone turned cold. "And our presence just updated it. The drone's feed flickered. Not cut, compressed. The image flattened, as if the shell was reducing information, choosing what to let them see. Through the distortion, the drone camera caught inside the half-open hatch, or a heartbeat. Sterling saw the interior. Not bodies, not floating debris, just walls lined with the same shallow grooves. And on one panel inside, scratched by something hard and human, a crude message, not readable text, but a symbol anyone raised on Earth's navigation would recognize. An arrow, pointing inward, a plea made of direction. Go deeper. Then the feed snapped back to normal. Cade's voice was tight. "It's manipulating our feed." Tanaka's face had gone pale. "Or it's filtering out what it considers irrelevant." Petrov's eyes were sharp on her tablet. "Captain, your biofeedback is stabilizing. Canceller is holding." Sterling stared at the half-open hatch. "Someone wanted the next person to follow," he said quietly. "Either to rescue them or to join them." Cade's voice was fierce. "Captain, no. We're not chasing arrows scratched by ghosts." Sterling turned his head slightly. meeting her eyes. "We are explorers," he said, "and we are humans. That craft is ours. Whoever touched it, whatever took it, made it part of this system. If there's any chance someone left a warning, we listen." Cade's jaw trembled with frustration. Warnings don't always mean go. Sometimes they mean run. Sterling nodded once. "Then we find out which." He looked at Tanaka. "Do we have any way to speak back without paying?" Tanaka swallowed. "With the handshake protocol, yes. We can answer queries, exchange proofs. But if the shell is a relay, it may report us." Sterling finished. Petrov's voice came flat. "Everything reports us now." Sterling looked at the older craft again. "Then we choose what we report." He leaned toward the shuttle's console and keyed the handshake interface. His voice stayed calm, but he felt Petrov's earlier warning like a hand on his neck. "Your calm is a doorway." "We are the Argo," Sterling said, and let Tanaka's system translate that into the hushband token. "We acknowledge the marked craft. We request record access. We request context." Tanaka's hands moved, shaping his words into physics. The shell responded immediately. The frost-like particles around them shifted, gathering into faint lines that formed a corridor. Subtle, like the debris corridor at the checkpoint. But here, inside the instrument, a path leading deeper into the shell's interior, Cade's voice went hard. "It's guiding us." Kale's voice was quiet, almost mournful. "It's answering." Petrov's eyes narrowed. "Or hurting." Sterling didn't deny it. "Timer," he said. Petrov's voice was immediate. 7 minutes, Cade muttered. 5 would have been smarter. Sterling looked at her. "Stay angry," he said quietly. "Anger is a kind of anchor." Cade's eyes flicked to him, surprised by the honesty, then back to the corridor. "Fine," she said. "But if I say pull back, you pull back." Sterling nodded. "Agreed." The shuttle followed the corridor of shifting frost deeper into the shell. The interior opened into a chamber that made the shell's size real. It was not a room. It was a hollow sphere within the hollow shell, a cavity big enough to hold mountains. They hovered near its edge, lights cutting across curvature that disappeared into darkness. And in that darkness, something moved. Not a creature. Structure. A lattice of thin arcs, like the suspended panels in the registry. But here they were larger, and they were arranged around a central void like ribs around a heart. At the center was an emptiness that felt deliberate, a volume where even the shuttle's LiDAR returned less than it should have, like the space itself refused to be measured. Tanaka's voice was barely a whisper. "That's a null core." Cal's voice came through, tight with realization. "Captain, this is a repeater. A hushband repeater. The null core is where information is. Compressed." Petrov's tone sharpened. "Compressed into what?" Cal hesitated. "Into something that can travel without being caught. A packet. A mark." Cade's voice was flat. "A mark like the grooves on the dead craft." Sterling stared at the arcs surrounding the null core. They reminded him of the chapel's dark glass floor with drifting echoes beneath, minds stored as light. Here, the storage medium was absence itself. Caller's voice came over calm from the Argo, tense. "Captain, we're seeing outbound hush coupling. Stronger now, the shell is actively relaying something toward the hub direction." Sterling's jaw tightened. "Something we triggered?" Caller hesitated. "Yes." Cade's hand clenched on the controls. "We're the message." Petrov's voice cut in, urgent. "Captain, neural suppression is increasing again. Your team is stabilizing, but Sterling, your pattern is dropping faster." Sterling felt it. The calm here wasn't peace. It was gravity. It pulled his thoughts into slower orbits. He could still think, but the impulse to care felt damped. That terrified him more than fear ever did. "Chancellor," he said. Tanaka's voice strained, maxed. "It's holding, but the field gradients here are steep. It's like trying to hum against a cathedral organ." Sterling stared at the null core and forced himself to choose concern, forced himself to feel the sharp edge of responsibility. "Petrov," he said quietly. "If I hesitate, I know." Petrov snapped. "Cade pulls you." Cade's voice came, fierce and grounded. "I will." Sterling nodded, grateful for her anger. The frost-like particles around them gathered again, forming not a corridor this time, but a shape, an interface made of drifting points. A question, rendered as structure. Tanaka's portable unit translated it into the closest human concept. Return or proceed. Not words. Never words, but a binary choice. Kale murmured, "It's asking if we will give something back." Cade's eyes narrowed. "We didn't take anything here." Petrov's voice was cold. "We took shields, hull behavior, silence. We took access." Tanaka whispered, "And we took the handshake protocol from the registry. That was a gift." Cade snapped, "It wasn't a gift. It was a transaction." Sterling stared at the choice hovering in drifting frost. Return or proceed. He felt the network's logic like a spine beneath the universe. You do not move forward without leaving a trace behind. Calder's voice came tense. "Captain, the outbound relay is intensifying. If we don't answer, it may answer for us." Sterling's jaw tightened. "What does return mean here?" Kale hesitated. "It could mean energy, data, or as could mean the marked craft." Cade's voice sharpened. "It wants the dead ship." Petrov's voice was tight. "Or it wants what the dead ship represents." Sterling felt the urge to proceed, because proceeding was what explorers did. He also felt the wrongness of stepping past a human craft and letting it be used as a credential forever. "Tanaka," he asked, "can we detach the mark from the craft? Can we unwrite it?" Tanaka swallowed. "Maybe. The grooves are waveguides. If we can disrupt the coupler pattern without destabilizing the craft." Cade cut in. "We can't destabilize anything in here. One mistake and we're a packet in that null core," Petrov added. "And Sterling can't afford another payment." Sterling stared at the half-open hatch in his mind. The arrow scratched inside, pointing deeper. "Return?" he said quietly. "We return what we can." Cade's eyes narrowed. "Captain," Sterling met her gaze, "we don't proceed by leaving our dead behind as keys." Cade's jaw tightened, but something like respect flickered there. "Fine," she said. "How?" Sterling looked at Tanaka. "Can you use the handshake protocol to negotiate a substitution? Return data instead of leaving the craft marked." Tanaka's eyes widened. "Like, we pay a toll." Petrov's voice was grim. "Better a toll than a memory." Tanaka nodded, hands moving fast. "I can offer the shell a copy of the handshake protocol itself. In open form. That's not personal. It's infrastructure." Kale's voice was thoughtful. "A return of language." Cade muttered. "Teaching the predator better teeth." Sterling didn't argue. "Or teaching the system a better way to avoid theft." Tanaka shaped the offer. A structured hushband packet containing the handshake protocol and their self-binding constraints. Withdrawal, consent, return, crew priority. Encoded in the same one-way proof manner. A promise given back as a tool. "Transmitting," Tanaka said. The frost interface shifted, the binary choice dissolved, and the particles gathered into a different shape. Complex, branching. Acceptance, then the shell reacted. A pulse moved through the interior arcs around the null core. Not light, but a subtle distortion that made the shuttle's instruments shiver. The older craft, still drifting near the rim gap behind them, jerked slightly as if tugged by an invisible thread. Cade's eyes widened. "It's pulling it." Sterling's pulse spiked. "No." Tanaka's voice went urgent. "It's not pulling it into the core. It's releasing it." The older craft drifted, not inward, but outward, away from the shell's interior gradients toward the rim gap. The grooves etched on its hull shimmered faintly, and then impossibly flattened. Not erased physically, but rendered inert, like a circuit burned out on purpose. Kale's voice came, tight with awe. "A mark is being cleared." Petrov exhaled sharply. "Captain, neural suppression is decreasing. Across the whole team." Cade's posture eased a fraction. "So it wanted an exchange, not a sacrifice." Sterling didn't relax. Or it learned we wouldn't sacrifice, and chose the cheaper path. Tanaka's eyes were wet with exhausted relief. Either way, we got it unmarked. The frost particles gathered one more time into a shape. This time, not a question, but a directive. A corridor, not deeper, outward. A path back toward the rim gap, and beyond it, toward the root. Calder's voice came from the bridge, stunned. "Captain, the outbound coupling just changed. It's cleaner, more formal. Like the shell updated its ledger with our return." Cade muttered. "So we're still recorded." Petrov's voice was tight. "But we're recorded as returning. That matters if this system has any concept of trust." Sterling stared at the null core in the chamber's center, that deliberate emptiness that could compress a mind into a packet. He felt the temptation to ask for more access, more knowledge, more protection. He also felt the cost of staying. "Timer," he said. Petrov's voice came immediately. 1 minute. Sterling nodded once. "We leave." Cade didn't argue. She turned the shuttle, following the frost corridor back. As they pulled away, Sterling glanced one last time at the chamber's arcs around the null core. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw something in the particles, an impression like a face forming briefly and then dissolving. Not a warning, not a greeting, just awareness. Then it was gone. They slipped out through the rim gap. The Argo waited outside, hull rim lit against the stars. Hushfield held low. The shuttle docked, and the older craft, unmarked now, drifted behind them in the shell's mouth like a ghost being exhaled. Back on the Argo, engineering became a triage center. Tanaka's hands shook as she ran diagnostics. Not from fear, but from the aftershock of holding a canceller at maximum against a structure that could hush a mind into stillness. Cade stood in the doorway, watching Sterling the way she would watch a weapon that might miss fire. Petrov met Sterling in the corridor outside medbay. Her eyes were hard. "How do you feel?" Sterling answered honestly. "Like I walked through deep snow and didn't realize how tired I was until I stopped." Petrov nodded once, accepting the metaphor. "Any missing time?" "No." "Any missing memories?" Sterling hesitated. He searched, reflexively, for rain on hot stone, and found nothing new missing. Only the same smooth absence where that specific summer storm used to be. "No," he said. Petrov's shoulders loosened a fraction. "Good." Cade stepped closer, voice low. "Captain, we cleared the mark from the dead craft by paying with infrastructure." Sterling nodded. "Yes." Cade's jaw tightened. "Now they have our handshake protocol in the wild." Sterling met her eyes. "Now they have a way to transact without theft," he said. "If the system values exchange, it may value that more than coercion." Cade's voice was flat. "Or it will use it to make coercion cleaner." Sterling didn't deny the possibility. "That's why we encoded our constraints," he said. "If they want to use the protocol, they also inherit a model of consent." Cade stared at him. "You're trying to teach a galaxy-sized machine ethics. Sterling's voice was quiet. I'm trying to stay human inside it. Cade held his gaze, then nodded once. Tight, reluctant. Fine, she said. Just don't confuse staying human with winning. Sterling didn't smile. I won't, Calder called from the bridge. Captain, he said, voice shaky with a kind of excitement that had learned humility. You need to see this. Sterling arrived on the bridge to find the lattice map displayed again, but changed. Where the route had been a set of stepping stones and a hub cluster, there was now a new overlay, a thin, clean line that connected them forward with fewer detours. Cale stood at science, eyes bright. The shell updated the route after our return, he said softly. It gave us a more direct path. Cade's eyes narrowed. A reward. Petrov's voice came over calm, wary. Or a funnel. Calder pointed at a small marker blinking near the hub direction. And Captain, the ghost signature. Sterling's throat tightened. What about it? Calder swallowed. It changed. It's clearer. Not stronger. Just less distorted. Like the shell stopped compressing it. Cale leaned forward. We can extract more structure now. It's not just cadence. It's content. Sterling felt his pulse quicken. Can you translate? Cale hesitated, not as language, but as intention. He tapped controls, and the hushband pattern was rendered visually on the display. A repeating structure with a sharp discontinuity, like someone had tried to say a sentence and had been cut off. Tanaka's voice came over calm from engineering, strained and amazed. Captain, the pattern includes a constraint token, not ours. Sterling's jaw tightened. Meaning? Tanaka swallowed. Meaning the older craft's crew made a promise to. Withdrawal. Consent. Return. Crew priority. Cade's eyes widened. They said the same words. Cale nodded slowly. Not words. Concepts. The same ethical shape. Calder's voice dropped. So they understood the system. They tried to play by its rules. Petrov's voice came quietly. And they still didn't come home. Silence held. Sterling stared at the route line toward the hub. He felt the weight of the next step like gravity. What does the content say? He asked. Cale's voice was soft, almost reverent, as if he feared saying it wrong. It's a warning and a direction. He looked up at Sterling. It says, do not proceed marked. Return first. Or you become the message. Cade's gaze snapped to Sterling. We just did, she said. Sterling nodded slowly. We returned. Cale's eyes were distant. And the route opened. Calder's voice was tight. Captain, the shell didn't just relay. It corrected. It let the older warning breathe again. Sterling stared at the stars beyond the viewport. He imagined the older crew, unknown names, unknown faces, still human enough to scratch an arrow inside a dying craft. They had tried. They had learned. They had failed. But their warning had survived, compressed into hushband cadence, waiting for someone with the right handshake to hear it. Sterling straightened. We follow the corrected route, he said, but we follow it like people who know the cost. Tanaka, keep the handshake protocol and our constraints locked. Petrov, tighten exposure rules. Cade, assume every reward is also a test. Calder, slow approach, no shortcuts we don't understand. One by one, they acknowledged. Cade's voice came last, low and fierce. And Captain! Sterling looked at her. If you start to like the hush, Cade said, if you start to sound too calm about losing things. Sterling nodded once. You pull me. Cade held his gaze, then nodded back. Good. The Argo turned toward the new line on the lattice map. The cleaner route the shell had opened. Behind them, the hollow shell drifted in the debris dark, like an instrument left humming after the musician had gone. And somewhere ahead, in the direction of the hub, something waited that had required a registry, a chapel, and a relay just to approach. Sterling watched the stars. He tried, one more time, to remember rain on hot stone. He couldn't, so he held on to something else instead. The sound of his crew's voices in his ear, loud and imperfect against the hush. A human noise, a necessary one. "Helm," he said, "take us forward." The Argo moved, and the universe, quiet, watchful, full of ledgers, recorded the motion like a heartbeat it intended to count. Thank you for listening. If you like this story, please subscribe for more.